All right, it's 7 o'clock. Let's get started. Welcome everybody to our third Basler chair. I'm Blaine Schubert, the director of the Center of Excellence in Paleontology, laying on my living room floor, where I have the ability to connect right to the wall with my computer. Our Basler chair is Mauricio Antón, and he is still here in Johnson City. And he is going to be available to answer questions after we show a video that he has put together for us to watch. Now, we have been working with this video and trying to get it to work smoothly. Hopefully it will be smooth. There's a possibility that it could be choppy, but definitely please stick around. After about 30 minutes, he will be here and available to answer questions. David, are you able to spotlight Mauricio for just a second so he can say hi?
Absolutely. All right, Mauricio, you are in the spotlight.
All right, there's
Hi.
Mauricio.
Welcome, everybody.
And David Moscato is also on here, and he's going to be the one that's going to help moderate with questions. And Chris Widga is also here available to help with some of the technological issues that we may have. And so without further ado, I'm going to try and share this. And what people can do as we're moving through it is you can ask questions in the question and answer link that you should be able to see there. And so as you ask questions, we will build those up and we'll be able to answer some of those questions as we move forward. Now, somebody has raised their hand.
That might be the same hand that was up. Oh.
If you can ask your question in the question and answer, that will be the way we'll answer questions.
Yeah, at the bottom of your screen, if you scroll to the bottom below Blaine's face, there should be an option that says Q&A. And as we move through, if you have questions, we'll read those out after the presentation is done, and Mauricio will be on hand to answer them. If you're having any other questions, just go ahead and throw them in there, and we'll see if we can address them.
All right, let me share my screen.
Hi, welcome to my last Basler Chair lecture for this semester here at ETSU. Today I'm going to talk to you about the first-hand study of extant animals as a reference for natural history reconstructions. As you know, I am a paleo artist, and this means that my work is to reconstruct the life appearance and the biology of extinct animals. And this kind of work implies a combination of art and science, because it is not enough that I can draw and paint, that I must be familiar with paleontology and with the anatomy and adaptations of modern animals. My basic methodology for the reconstruction of extinct creatures can be summarized in 3 steps. First, I begin by reconstructing the skeleton and articulating it. And for this, my main reference is the shape of the articulations, the joints, which gives me indications about the angle between each bone and the next. The second step is the reconstruction of the successive layers of muscle and soft tissue, and for this the main reference is the shape of the attachment areas that muscle and tendons leave on the bone. The third stage is the reconstruction of the external appearance and the skin, the fur, color patterns, and this, of course, is the most speculative step of the reconstruction process. All through this process, the anatomical information contained in the fossils themselves is the anchor that makes the reconstruction reliable. But at the same time, reference to extant animals is essential. Now, these drawings and paintings of saber-toothed cats and of extant cats are the work of master paleo artist Charles Knight. And he once said that anybody who wants to reconstruct extinct animals must first be perfectly able to draw and paint the modern ones. And this makes perfect sense if we consider that the living organisms are the obligate reference for all those aspects of the biology of extinct animals that are not preserved in the fossil record. And in terms of reconstructing the vertebrates, and in particular the mammals, which are the subject of most of my reconstructions, our starting point is usually just fossilized bones. But then one could ask, if we are going to reconstruct an extinct animal that nobody has ever seen alive, and we use the modern animals as reference, are not we just copying the modern animals and just minimizing the unique traits of the extinct species by doing so? Well, in this talk I will explain to you how exactly we proceed to use these references from the living animals and still preserve all the peculiarities of the extinct species in our reconstruction. Artists who draw and paint animals have long been aware of a relationship between the shape of the skeleton and the visible structure of living animals. And one way to visualize that relationship is through the study of the bone points, meaning those points of the animal's anatomy where the bone comes closest to the skin. We can see those bone points in this drawing of the skeleton and the outline of a jaguar, for instance. By becoming familiar with these bone points, we can develop a sort of X-ray vision that allows us to see the skeleton inside the shape of the living animal. Digital visualization techniques now allow us to see that kind of relationships even more clearly. CT scans of intact specimens show us the position of the skeleton inside the complete animal, and thus provide a priceless reference for the reconstruction of animals known only from their bones. For instance, these CT scans of jaguar and leopard have been very helpful when reconstructing the soft tissues of the saber-toothed cats from their skulls. These scans of a cheetah leg in turn show us how little muscle there is around the bone in the more distal segments of the leg. But when we want to get a more detailed idea of the specific relationships between individual muscles and bone, then we need to resort to dissection. And dissection is a destructive process, meaning that when we have dismantled the specimen, there is no way to put it back together. So we need to plan very carefully what we want to see during a dissection. During the process, we make lots of photographs, as in this case where we see the different stages of the dissection of that cheetah leg, or here where we see different layers of the anatomy of a cougar. And yet, useful as photographs are, nothing can take the place of live sketching during a dissection, because you would be surprised at how meaningless the photographs of a dissection can look, even only weeks after the event. By contrast, the sketches can allow us to achieve two important things. One, to fix in our memory the structures that we are observing. And second, to create an image that is selective in its contents and where all the emphasis is on the relevant details. So, with the combination of CT scans and dissection photographs and sketches, we are putting together a lot of useful information that we can use for the reconstruction of extinct animals, a process which, after all, is essentially a reverse dissection. But reconstructing the anatomy and appearance of an extinct animal as a static, standing figure is in a way only the beginning. We also need to make visible our hypothesis about the locomotion and behavior of those extinct animals. And reconstructing locomotion implies a combination of the study of comparative anatomy and a keen observation of living animals in action. First, we need to look at the skeleton for any indications of the kind of locomotion that an animal can use. And in the case of mammals, those species that are good runners usually share a series of morphological features, including rather long legs, long limbs, where the distal segments are more elongated and where there is a reduction of mass in those distal segments with loss of digits and with loss of muscle mass. One of the extreme examples of this kind of adaptations, of course, are horses, which have lost all digits except the third or central one. And then, when we carefully examine the anatomy of the Miocene horse Hipparion, we can see that it shares most of the adaptations of the modern horse, even if it still retains reduced lateral digits on its feet. And so we can imagine that it would use an essentially similar pattern of locomotion. This kind of comparative work allows us to identify the best analogues among modern animals for the reconstruction of locomotion in the extinct species. But then the next step is to analyze the gait patterns so that we can transfer them to the fossil species. And photographic sequences like these we are seeing here by Edward Muybridge pioneered the study and the analysis of locomotion in detail already in the 19th century. There is another source of very relevant information about the locomotion of extinct animals, which is in the form of their fossilized footprints and trackways. And one incredible example of this is the fossil track site of Salinas de Añana in Spain. It is a site of early Miocene age, and it miraculously preserves the trackways of several species of carnivores, including perhaps the earliest trackways of cats. And there is one characteristic of trackways, and it is that the faster one animal is moving, the narrower the trackway becomes. And in the case of the fossil cats from Salinas, the trackways were very narrow, even if the distances between the footprints were indicating low speeds. So these animals were just walking. And the explanation for this apparent contradiction is in the fact that the cats are incredibly narrow as seen from above. And this is clearly seen, for instance, in this video of a walking tiger seen from above that we filmed a few weeks ago in Knoxville Zoo. Now, having such narrow bodies is an adaptation for very efficient locomotion on land, and not all mammals are like that. If you look at squirrels, for instance, they walk with more separated limbs. And the fact that the Salinas trackways are so narrow is an additional indication that already in the early Miocene, cats were very narrow animals. So, as we have seen, one useful way to get locomotion references of modern animals is a visit to the zoo. But captive animals can only show us a limited range of locomotion modalities, because of course they are constrained in terms of space. But wild animals have plenty of room to roam, and their motions are always natural. So it is essential to be able to observe animals in the wild. And not very long ago I was able to observe wild tigers in the forests of central India. And here you can see a brief clip, a video clip from a documentary that I did about those tigers. And here you can see my interpretation of the anatomy of one of those wild tigers, showing the muscles and even the skeleton inside the body. So, for the creation of these anatomical drawings of the tiger, my starting point was capture a video frame of that wild tiger, and then I applied the different techniques that I have been discussing this far, from the identification of the bone points to the use of my reference images from dissections and CT scans. So, once we have been able to observe, film and photograph wild animals and analyze their locomotion, we are in a better position to improve our reconstructions of the locomotion of the extinct animals. And as an example, we can look at these videos of zebras in Africa just walking around, and they provide a detailed reference for the walking gait. And then we can transfer that walking gait to the three-toed Miocene horse Hipparion, as we did for this video that was used in an exhibition about the fossil faunas from the sites of Batallones in Spain. Such basic reconstructions of locomotion in extinct animals can in turn be improved by incorporating the data from the fossil footprints and trackways, as we were discussing. And one interesting example are the fossil trackways of Hipparion from the African site of Laetoli. There, as the horses were walking on the relatively slippery, wet volcanic ashes that cover the landscape, they were using an unusual kind of walk that is rather like a fast pace, and which apparently is an especially stable kind of locomotion to use on slippery surfaces. But then the trackway tells us a story about how a colt just crossed in front of an adult and forced it to brake. And then the adult had a slip, and at that particular moment the lateral digits printed on the ground, which is something they don't do during normal locomotion. And in that split second the relevant information was printed in the fossil record about the lateral digits in this hipparion. And when I was getting ready to reconstruct that moment in time with an illustration, I was fortunate to have photos in my files of wild zebras that I have observed in Etosha National Park in Namibia, showing that particular moment when a colt is crossing in front of its mother and forces her to slow down momentarily. Now, going back briefly to the Miocene fossil trackways from Salinas de Añana in Spain, one interesting piece of information we got at that site is the presence of trackways of cats that were parallel to each other, indicating that these animals were moving together. And this could be seen as evidence of group behavior, and the question was, are we seeing something like a lion pride in these small cats from the Miocene? And it was interesting to compare this evidence to videos like this one that I filmed in Africa of a group of cheetahs. And we find 4 cheetahs walking together. Is this group like a lion pride? In fact, this was a mother cheetah with her 3 adult-sized cubs. And this kind of evidence suggests that what we are seeing in Salinas is actually not a pride, but a family. And it also suggests that back in the early Miocene already, young cats would remain together and with their mother when they had already attained full adult size. Now in this other video you can see a matriarchal herd of elephants approaching a waterhole in Sabuti in Botswana. And videos like these were very helpful for me when I had to make a reconstruction of a herd of elephantids of the genus Stegotetrabelodon from what is today Abu Dhabi. So this herd of elephantids left their trackways across a mud flat, and the information that we see in those trackways is a perfect match for the kind of locomotion patterns that we observe in the videos of the modern elephants. So now let me show you another example of how a detailed comparison of anatomy and locomotion in modern animals can allow us a more subtle reconstruction of locomotion in extinct forms. So let us look at a comparison of the walking gait of lions and hyenas. The way big cats walk is unmistakable. But in contrast, the walk of a spot hyena is more dog-like. What is the key to such difference? Of course, the limbs of the lion are heavier, but look at the wrists. They turn to the sides with each step. The wrists of the hyena move forwards almost in a straight line. This is the walk of a dedicated runner. But in the lion, the whole forearm and paw supinate as the leg advances. Paw supination allows cats to grab prey and climb. Can we know if an extinct carnivore, like a saber-toothed cat, would walk more like a lion or more like a hyena? Well, in fact, we can. A detailed study of the shape of the articulations, the joints of the forelimb, will show us the degree of supination of the wrist of the forepaw. So we know that some saber-toothed cats, like Smilodon, had a high degree of supination, and that means that when they walk, their wrists would point strongly to the sides, as in a lion. On the other hand, other saber-tooths, like Homotherium, had a different forelimb anatomy, with rotation of the wrist more restricted to the sagittal or vertical plane. So it is likely that Homotherium would walk in an intermediate way between a lion and a hyena. Locomotion is, of course, only one aspect of the behavior of extinct animals. And for instance, when we are dealing with carnivores, one important aspect of behavior is predation. And so now I want to share with you a couple of clips from my documentary films where I deal with the reconstruction of hunting and killing behavior in saber-tooths as inferred from the observation of anatomy and action in their modern relatives, the big cats. So all the wildlife footage that you are going to see in these videos was filmed by me in the wilderness of East Africa.
These plains are home to countless gazelles, the ideal cheetah prey, including the larger Grant's gazelle and the smaller but incredibly fast Thompson's gazelle. The cheetah is the perfect sprint runner, thanks to its long, thin legs and flexible vertebral column. But it has sacrificed strength. Its paws have little muscular power, and its claws are only partly retractable. In the southern Serengeti, we find a mother cheetah stalking a gazelle herd, while her cubs imitate her stalking motions. Her sprint catches the gazelle and us by surprise, but on arriving to the kill site, we can see the classic feline throat bite in action. Surprisingly, the prey hardly bleeds from the bite that kills it. The cheetah has an amazingly powerful bite for its size. Its short muzzle provides a strong pressure at the canine tips, and its biting musculature allows it to sustain the bite for many minutes, making sure that the prey cannot take a breath. But the cat itself is quite short of breath after the chase, and yet its enlarged nasal opening makes it easier for it to take all the oxygen it so urgently needs. The cubs are well trained, and only when the mother calls will they come to eat. They are really fortunate to have such an efficient mother. Lions, leopards, or cheetahs have enormously strong bites, which they can also sustain for a long time. I witnessed a dramatic example of this in Samburu Reserve in Kenya. We came across a female leopard that had just caught an impala ram and had its jaws cramped around the antelope's muscle. Should the leopard release its grip for a second, the antelope might take a breath and the whole process would have to begin again. For many minutes, the leopard did not move, holding its iron grip. As it held the muzzle of the impala, its canines were likely to touch bone, but thanks to their conical shape, they can withstand such collisions well. Once the prey stopped breathing, the leopard got ready to carry it away. Once again, its all-terrain canines served the hunter well, as she carried an antelope heavier than herself. The powerful muscles needed for this kind of heavy work are short and thick, and function best at relatively small gapes, and if the leopard has to bite at a less convex surface, it may be unable to close its jaws. What about Promegantherium? Not only was it able to open its jaws wider than modern cats, but thanks to the changes in its mastoid region, the muscles coming from the neck could provide a powerful downward motion to the whole head. This motion allowed the animal to sink its canines in the flesh of prey, and when the gape was a bit smaller, the jaw-closing musculature could do its job perfectly. In this way, the saber-tooths could use their long, flattened upper canines to pierce the flesh of the prey's throat, causing massive blood loss and a quick death.
So, I hope I have been able to show you how using the modern animals as a reference for the reconstruction of the extinct ones doesn't mean that we are just blindly transferring their features. On the contrary, this kind of careful comparison implies that we can incorporate the information from the fossil record into a coherent set or whole, while making the detailed differences ever more visible and meaningful. Thank you very much.
Okay, David, you want to start with questions?
Sure. So anybody in the chat who wants to ask a question of Mauricio, I'm going to go ahead and spotlight Mauricio now. So Mauricio, your face is on screen for all to see. There is a Q&A option at the bottom of everybody's screen. So anyone who wants to, go ahead and type your question in there and I will read it out loud for our guest speaker to see. I'm going to start with this first question that just came in, Mauricio, from Carolyn, which is, what software do you use for these illustrations and how did you get into paleo art?
Well, to the first question, I use good old Photoshop. And in fact, I am still using one of the earliest versions of Photoshop because I'm actually using it as a set of pencils and brushes. So I essentially ignore most of the fancy creative facilities of Photoshop. So I could use Corel Paint or any of the other programs, but I got used early on to just shaping my own brushes with very simple operations of control of pressure and transparency and so on. And so it works perfectly for me. And I use a regular digitizing tablet not the sort of tablets where you actually have a tactile screen, which actually makes things a little bit more complicated for me. So it's a simple, really kind of digital tools. And how I got into paleo art, it was just a childhood fascination with prehistoric life, which came to me through the artwork of the early 20th century masters of paleo art. So it was something very natural that happened very early on. So I knew I wanted to do this. A different matter was becoming a professional in paleo art. And it was a bit more complicated. So I had like a false start. I began as a fine art painter. But a few years afterwards, a series of coincidences and circumstances allowed me to contact again with my old vocation. And so here I am. Any more questions?
We actually have several coming in, Mauricio. We have one from somebody you know, Jack Singh. Yeah, fascinating talk, he said. Was the Laetoli Hipparion able to make lateral toe tracks with just extension of those toes? Or were those side toes so far off the ground that the individual was leaning, tilting that limb when making the impression?
Yeah, one problem with the Laetoli footprints is that, wonderful as they are, they don't really provide an amazing amount of detail. So compared to the fossil footprints from Salinas de Añana that have also shown in the video, the Laetoli ones look blurred, and so sometimes you cannot really see all that you would want to see. But at any rate, from what the footprints do show, it appears that during normal locomotion, the lateral digits would never print. So they were too far up, apparently. And the only reason why there is a one or two, I don't remember exactly how many footprints where you do actually see the prints of the lateral digits, it's because the animal slipped for a moment, so that a lot of weight went unnaturally to one of the hind limbs, and so the animal almost fell, and that's the moment when the lateral digits print. That seems to be the case there.
All right. Among our we actually have had several people ask this next question. So this comes from a whole bunch of different people who are asking, is there any type of animal that has been the most challenging for you to reconstruct?
Lots of them. I mean, it's always a challenge, and I would rather shortlist those animals that are not especially difficult. So if I had to choose one, I would probably go to animals that are inferred to have unusual soft tissue structures, like, for instance, the trunks of proboscideans. So we know modern elephants, we know what kind of osteological structures go with their trunks, but when we look at the fossil record, then things get less clear. So you have the kind of modifications in the nasal area, the kind of retraction of the nasals, even on top of the eyes. That indicates there was something going on there. There was some kind of trunk, but you would be surprised at the amount of disagreement there can be about if this or that proboscidean had a long trunk, very mobile, or if it was more shortish or tapered-like. And for me, the most difficult of them is the Dinotherium. Dinotherium is kind of proboscidean with downward pointing tusks on the mandible. It evidently had some kind of trunk. And was it long and flexible? Was it maneuverable? Was it a shortish, fat thing just hanging there? You will see different interpretations out there. You only have to Google Dinotherium and you will find of all sorts of strange images. And the reason why I normally draw them and paint them with rather longish trunks, not quite as long as in an elephant, but still rather longish, was to give them a way to drink, because due to their particular digestive system, all proboscideans are likely to have been heavily dependent on standing water for survival. And if Dinotherium had to drink with the kind of anatomy it has in its forelimbs, its columnar forelimbs and very short neck, you are hard pressed to imagine how they would do it. And a trunk is such a convenient solution. So after back and forth discussion with my advisors, we reached that compromise. But still, I'm hoping one day we will find one of those miraculous complete associated skeletons with an imprint of the soft tissue around it, as in Meso in Germany, one of those incredible fossil sites, and we get direct evidence. Otherwise, it's frustrating, really. And so much of this work is one has to learn to live with that frustration and be thankful for whatever new bits of information keep coming from the fossil.
Mauricio, the next one is about big cats. And the question is, how would Megantereon have hunted in contrast or in comparison to some of its competitors like Dinofelis, Homotherium, and the pantherine cats?
Well, the anatomy of Megantereon, if compared to a range of modern big cats, is most similar to a jaguar. There are remarkable similarities in terms of how robust it was, how muscular, how short-limbed, how strong. And so it was not built for the chase. It was built for stalk and a very quick rush towards prey. And it has the kind of anatomy that we find in modern big cats that live in forests as well. So it was probably a solitary animal that killed medium and large size prey, and it would probably stalk very cautiously, very deliberately, calculating all its moves and getting incredibly close to its prey, so that at a distance of maybe 10, 20 meters at most, it would get on top of its prey with just a few leaps, and then overpower that prey with the enormous strength of its forepaws and a quick killing bite with those very long canines to cause massive blood loss. And then it lived in the late Pliocene, early Pleistocene, together with a range of other big cats, some of which would kill in a not so different manner. I don't think Dinophilus would kill very differently, although it would probably be not so efficient in killing larger prey instantly, because its canines were not so long and piercing. And then Homotherium would be almost in the opposite end of the spectrum, being an animal with long legs, almost gracile, and with paws which had proportionally less strength and less ability to rotate and to supinate. And so it would, sure enough, kill large prey, but probably it would chase those large prey out in the open terrain, and it would work as a team. You would probably have 3-4 Homotherium working together to bring down large prey.
All right, Mauricio, this next question is in regards to the work that you've been doing with our team at the Gray Fossil Site here in East Tennessee. Have you enjoyed creating art at the Gray Fossil Site, and what has been your favorite animal here?
Well, careful how you answer that one, Mauricio.
I don't have much opportunity to choose a favorite animal from Gray Fossil Site, because I have concentrated on one animal since I arrived here, and it is the red panda. So if I had the choice and the time to work with many other of the wonderful animals from Gray Fossil Site, then I would think, oh, is this my favorite or is this other one? But at any rate, I couldn't probably choose a more fascinating animal than the red panda from Gray. It has a combination of similarities and differences, very subtle compared to the modern red panda, that it is a joy to work in its reconstruction, because at the same time we have access to incredible first-hand information about the anatomy and adaptations of the red panda, working with the nearby zoos like the Knoxville Zoo. So it is a work in progress, and it is very promising. We have already hinted at some really very interesting aspects of the anatomy and locomotion of the gray red panda. And so over the next months, I'm still expecting to have a lot of fun. And so was this all the question? Was there a second part to this question?
That was it, Mauricio. Yeah, one of the things to mention is that, of course, Mauricio was here as an artist in resident as well as being the Basler chair, and part of that was spending time at the Natural History Museum at the Gray Fossil Site, and unfortunately that was cut short, and so he hasn't been able to look at a lot of those fossils. But another species that he was able to look at was some of the Arctotherium bear material from the Yucatan of Mexico. So
yeah. That's another very fascinating creature, and working with those superbly preserved and three-dimensional fossils that come from those amazing underwater locations is also another exciting adventure. So I always am happiest when I can work with abundant and well-preserved fossil samples, because it may be a matter of temperament. I'm not happy when I have to do a lot of speculation. So if I have good fossils to hold to, that's when I'm at my happiest as a paleo artist.
Okay, Mauricio, this next question is, if you could see any extinct mammal in the flesh, what species would you choose?
Megantherium, yeah, or
Yeah.
any of the other Pleistocene saber-toothed cats. I have spent so much time studying their anatomy, comparing with modern big cats, and there are still so many open questions that I'm sure if I saw one of them in the flesh, I would have to break my drawings and throw them to the garbage, but I wouldn't mind that. I mean, I would mind that, but it would be far compensated by the pleasure and the satisfaction of really finding out how they really were, down to the smallest detail of the color of their fur or whatever. So yeah, that would be the one I must wish to see.
So I'm going to go ahead and combine two questions. These are from two different people who are essentially asking, do you have any experience reconstructing reptiles or birds, and how do they differ from mammals?
Yeah. If we include the dinosaurs as reptiles, yeah, at the beginning of my career, I did quite a lot of dinosaur art. And that was, I mean, those years when I worked more on the dinosaurs were after the dinosaur renaissance, but before much of these feather dinosaurs started to come out from those incredible fossil sites in China. And so my dinosaur art is a sort of, it's paleo art in itself. It is dated, but it was fun to do. And I still do some bird artwork because now and then you have to incorporate a bird to a tertiary landscape. So even if I am mostly a paleo mammal artist, I now and then have the pleasure of working on birds. And what is the main difference? Well, when you have to reconstruct the skeleton of a dinosaur, for instance, the bones give you less clear or sometimes more ambiguous information about the articulations between the bones. They are not as mechanical as those of mammals. So what is the range of flexion and extension between a femur and a tibia? It's something a little bit more of an open question, or so it was in my experience back in those days. So I feel comfortable with the mammals because their joints, the articulation surfaces, the bones, are almost like a piece of machinery. Often they give very clear indications about how far you can really rotate an articulation before it hits.
All right, Mauricio, the next one is also a combination of questions, and it is specifically about paleo art and becoming a paleo artist. So what advice would you give someone who's considering a career in becoming a paleo artist? And also, how do you feel about the increasing number of paleo artists that are out there? And maybe you could also talk a little bit about sort of the accuracy aspects that we've talked about.
Yeah, I think the two questions are very much intertwined because you are hoping to become a paleo artist. I think that you need to be very clear about facing a tough career, because there is a lot of demand for paleo art out there, but we don't have the kind of clients that are used to pay a lot of money. So the fact that there are so many amateurish paleo artists out there is blurring the concepts of quality and of professionality, so that people give their work cheap just for being exposed out there, and the editors and the museum curators sometimes don't show a very clear or stringent criterion for quality. So if you are starting your career as a paleo artist, of course, you need to make up your mind to give some of your work, or to give it not for a lot of money at the beginning, but you need to have a horizon. How long are you going to do this? Because when you need to pay the bills, you reach a point where you have to tell your client, okay, I'm a professional and I'm going to do serious work, so you need to pay me like you pay any other professional involved in the making of this book or in the making of this exhibition. So I think we need to get higher standards of self-demand in terms of I need to become a good draftsman, a good painter, and also a good paleontologist. You have to be very strict with yourself. You don't have to think, I am already there. I mean, after 30 years in this career, I don't think I am there. I'm just learning. I'm learning every day. So I think that's the frame of mind. And so, because you are doing your best, because you are very strict with yourself, you also have to give clear conditions to your clients. And in that way, hopefully, we can fix this current situation where we see hundreds of images out there on the internet, some of them being published by respected outlets like National Geographic or BBC, and which really are not serious at all. So I think from museum curators and editors and publishers, we need them to do an effort, but also we have to get serious about this profession.
All right, I think we'll stop there, Mauricio. And David, can you set it up so that Mauricio can also answer some of these questions on the Gray Fossil Site website or on the Gray Fossil Site Facebook page?
Absolutely, yeah. We can go through the questions that didn't get answered today, and we'll find a way to put them up online so that people can get the answers to the questions we didn't get to.
And we will also post the original video that we watched earlier on YouTube, and it will hopefully come across better than maybe it did in some places. And so with that, Mauricio, thanks so much. We're all clapping. So thank you. And
thank you very much. Thank you. Also, thank you everybody for your patience with our little technological difficulties. So if you have, again, the patience to watch the video again on the YouTube channel, I think it will be a more relaxed and rewarding experience.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.